Hi, everybody. Hello, designers. Everybody excited to be here? I hope. I know it's 4:30. It's getting to be a little bit of a drowsy hour. So I'm going to see if I can pick up the energy a bit. I have to say, for me, personally, it's a real pleasure to be here. A lot of the venues that I find myself in lately, like many of you, are not design-centric venues. And when I go and speak at health conferences or other places, there's a smattering of designers in the room. So I have to say it's a real treat to be here in a true creative community around so many designers. So I'm really enjoying the privilege to be here and to be able to kick things off. So what do you want to talk about? Well, the truth is we have a lot to talk about and only about 36 hours. So my goal in kicking things off is to try and frame up some of those topics in a way that may carry us through a bit the day. And I thought, in all fairness to Rick and Doug, that I would start with the thesis of this conference. How many of you noticed this on the website or in the program? Cool. How many of you agree with this statement? How many of you are confused? Okay. So when they asked me to kick it off, I kind of felt the responsibility to take on this topic, and I've been staring at it for a couple weeks. And I was doing some homework with my daughter. She's 12. She's in pre-algebra, so I'm relearning things like negative exponents, variables, things like that. And so one of the things I learned and remembered from those kind of tutorials with my daughter is that sometimes you can reveal the meaning of an equation if you shift things around a bit. So I tried this. Does this help? It doesn't seem to, unfortunately. I'm sorry. But I think it's a critical thing to point out, which is that we are not going to be taken credibly in the areas of society we really want to impact if we can't frame up these topics correctly. And often, in order to frame them up correctly, the thing you need to do is to take design out of the equation. So let's look at social value and business value for a second and kind of the relationship between them. I don't think it's an exaggeration in today's world of Occupy Wall Street and Bain Capital, of Apple and Foxconn, for most people in society to think that there's kind of an inverse relationship here. If you increase business value, you're kind of reducing the social benefits for profit. It's a pretty reasonable assumption, a prevailing assumption today, and I think for most of you, my guess is if you think about your own design practice, as you focus on profitability and revenue, you feel like there's less opportunity to focus on some of these issues we're going to be talking about. Flip side of that is there's a sense that if you want to spend more time and get more deeply involved in social issues, that you're going to be stepping away from the business and the market that you might have gotten kind of good at. As I mentioned, I spent a lot of time in different venues, and I will say in those venues, particularly amongst NGOs, governments, nonprofits, there is a sea change in attitude and a huge appreciation for the role of the market as a key driver to scale, as possibly the only driver to scale. Think about all those examples that we just saw. In most cases, the only path to scale is through the market. So I'm a passionate advocate for linking these two things together. And I want to set that as a point of view for you to think about as we go through the rest of the next 36 hours. What is the connection between these two things, and where and how can design play a meaningful role at that intersection? Now, when I started as a designer, particularly as an interaction designer, back in the 1800s, no, back in the early 80s, it was simple. There didn't seem to be such a diametric kind of pull in two directions, right? There was this sense that design fundamentally had this humanist mission to bring a sense of humanity, an understanding of the end user into businesses throughout the world, to create a sense of empathy, and to help create products and services that are more meaningful. It doesn't seem like a radical idea today. We all take it for granted. In fact, many people who don't consider themselves designers take it for granted. This was a radical image, though. This is an old advertisement from Frog, and the notion that a young woman would be smiling in front of a computer was a very radical idea. In 2006, this man exposed me to an even more radical idea. His name is Paul Pollack, and he spent 20 years creating solutions for $1 a day farmers. And I had a chance to run a workshop, actually AIGA-sponsored workshop with him in 2006. And What he made me realize, seems obvious now too, was that I could spend my time meeting the needs of all those consumers and not touch 90% of the world's population. So how do you put these things together? On the one side, you have what I would call humanist design, a place I think where most of us grew up in and where there's an implicit understanding of social value and meaning being created. And then we have what I'll call humanitarian design, so the same tools and skills focused on very specific humanitarian topics, very, very broad and pressing societal needs. So I ask you to think about what it's like to live in the middle here. And I'm going to give you a couple quick examples from my own practice at Frog. I know what you're thinking. It's an aircraft engine. Why are we looking at an aircraft engine? So one of the clients I work with a lot these days is General Electric. This is the kind of stuff they make. And we're working with them on a layer of software and tools that improve the ability to manage big-scale infrastructure, whether it's power plants, aircraft engines, or locomotives. They are not doing this for humanitarian reasons. I don't need to tell you that, right? They're trying to increase the value of these products and systems and infrastructure for their customers. But on the other level, if you think about it, if they can increase the efficiency with which these are managed, the intelligence, there's a potential for huge cost savings and resource savings globally. There's also potential to optimize the way huge flows of humanity move through cities and across countries and national borders. There's a potential here to create social value beyond anything that I've ever worked on. Another example, maybe a little closer to home, so this is working for Roche and looking at diabetes products, glucose meters, et cetera, for teenagers. And they had developed some products that were much more lightweight and easy to wear. And they wanted to kind of bring a brand of freedom. They wanted to create the right story and brand around it, work on the product design with us. And the whole story here was how do you make that experience? So these are kids in Disney World who are part of a convention of kids with diabetes. So it's a chance for them to be fairly free and open with their condition. So how can the product reinforce that idea? Two more quick examples. This is from East Africa, working with a major global financial services company that's looking at mobile money services at the base of the pyramid and trying to understand how they can fit into the lives of the unbanked. Finally, pure public sector partnership here, one launched at another AIGA conference where I got to know Doug Powell and Rick, called 5/50. So this is Robert Wood Johnson, one of our sponsors here, funding a look at healthy aging and what kinds of tools and services could broaden access and encourage greater use of standard vaccinations. So here's our spectrum. And the thing I want you to be clear about is that business lives across that spectrum, and business value can be created across that spectrum. And that is my hypothesis for you, is that to deliver social value, we have to understand how to create business value. And secondly, that as we explore social impact and social impact initiatives, we're learning a huge amount that can benefit work in the public and the private sector. But the role of business value, and I would say kind of where design and business value come together, is changing a lot. This is a snapshot. I spend a lot of time at Frog trying to collect every example I can find where we can connect our work to meaningful measures, whether those measures are things like organizational impact, market success, et cetera. How many of you collect these things? I should see more hands, okay? The problem is we don't share them. But it is hard. It is hard to find good measures where we can connect design to business value. Even in this area, we cannot rest on our laurels. But this is changing dramatically right now. And I want to take a second to look at what's happening in the area of design and business value. And one of the big changes is not design thinking. One of the big changes is design doing. And a real appreciation for the first time of the role of design as an engine to launch new products and services in the market. The role of design in a huge wave of entrepreneurism that's going and startups that are going on right now. This is fundamentally different than what happened in 2000. And obviously the most striking example is Instagram, but it's happening everywhere. New York, San Francisco, Nairobi, et cetera. And the role of design is central. And our clients, major clients and customers, are looking to design and designers to help accelerate the process of innovation within their own companies. Second thing, no big surprise, right? Huge understanding of design as a major corporate asset now. 97% of this award was based on design patents, not technical patents. So we know that design is being looked differently within corporate America. And we've trained people. We've trained consumers to appreciate design on the level of microns and millimeters. And now we're seeing the connection between millimeters and millions and millions and millions of dollars of value. What's that causing? It's causing what I'm seeing is a huge insourcing movement, huge desire for businesses to build design as an internal capability, and a migration of leaders from across our industry, whether it's Nicholas Felton or Lisa Straussfeld, into companies not just Google and Facebook, but Bloomberg and GE. And this is causing a change in our own practice of design as we figure out how to partner within organizations much more deeply to grow and change the way they approach and make basic business decisions. So this is some work we've done with GE to help them build a user experience capability and help to create a playbook and a process and a community that allows them to effectively do that. But coming back to the central question of business value, as you get deeper and more engaged in all the layers of an organization, it's a little bit harder to measure the value you're creating. It's a little bit harder. It doesn't stand out as much as a new product on the shelf. It's kind of invisible and integrated. I really love this metaphor of dark matter. How many people have ever read anything Dan Hill's written? He is one smart motherfucker. And he writes about design strategy and comes with these crazy metaphors, dark matter, Trojan horses. I truly suggest you check this one out. But we all know what he means, right? When we're dealing with organizations, and there's this sense that decisions are being made all over the place. And you can't really pin down where it's happening or who's making them. There's no material there, right? You just see the effects of it. So I'd say a key challenge for design moving forward is how do we influence that form of decision making? How do we integrate our way and create value inside incredibly powerful and impactful organizations? So let's switch to looking at social value, because my personal experience has been that a lot of what I've learned about how you deal with that dark matter actually comes from situations in which I've stepped out of traditional engagement models and engaged with more diverse partners. And the first thing you understand is it's not about users, it's about communities. It seems like a simple, obvious idea when you're trying to address a health problem in Bangladesh. But it's the same thing when you're working with a traditional client. His team, the partners they work with, the management structure, it is a community. And when you think about it that way, you think about design differently, in a more inclusive way. And think about how you're going to approach it with fewer givens about where value is going to be created. Fundamentally, on a number of the areas where we've engaged in meaningful kind of social change projects, there is no client at the center of it. There are many organizations and partners working together, and that gets some of that dark matter back out on the table because there's a common mission, nobody owns it, nobody has a set playbook. And there's a chance to create much greater alignment, in this case with representatives of many of UNICEF's most powerful country offices coming together in our studios with other partners to look at the role of mobile health and how to accelerate the ways they can measure the effectiveness of their health programs through mobile technology. You also have an opportunity to work across a much broader ecosystem, and the boundaries of it are much less clear when you engage in a lot of social innovation work. And I would argue, again, that this is a really powerful way to evolve and test your practice as a designer. And around that, in many of these projects, there's an opportunity for much more radical openness. Openness about the solutions, about the learnings, openness to different partners and ways to include them together. And I would say that transparency is starting to appeal to business, as business is finding that the closed doors through which they make decisions and the closed doors through which they develop and try and launch products often are holding them back from tapping into innovation and engaging and finding value across a broader ecosystem than what they typically engage with. So this is not just a feature of working in the social sector, but it's something that we can learn and bring to the private sector. Challenging assumptions. So this is a project we worked on with a company that's trying to radically redefine what a phone is and completely disconnect it from hardware so that you have something in the cloud that allows you to make calls, access email, access SMS, access voicemail, et cetera, and you can do it from any piece of hardware. Seems obvious in today's PC world, yet we're still not there. And this is one of the most important things that I think I've learned from some of the work we've done, and that's that sense of urgency. Corporate America can be very lazy when they're looking at 6-month cycles of measurement and reviews and bonus cycles. It's hard sometimes to drive really clear decision making. And the urgency you find, in this case, you're looking at dried blood samples. So this is information that is critical to the life and survival of young children all across East Africa. And we've been working with UNICEF on projects to get that information to people much more quickly so that they can get on treatment earlier. And that sense of speed and urgency forces you to make quick decisions and get things done and create things. We worked with girls in Nairobi from a number of the slums. And over a 4-week period, we did many different things with them to create new ideas and new concepts for how they could connect with each other and take away some of the isolation, even if they're living cheek to jowl in Kibera. Often girls are extremely isolated from each other. And so we created a prototype and eventually launched a little app called Get Girls Talking. And the last day, 4 weeks later, we were in the iHub in Nairobi. And they were texting to girls throughout Nairobi, giving advice and answering questions in a way through a channel that had never been there before. And in 4 weeks, we developed this. And we've done that on a large scale, broad messaging campaigns that reach almost all corners of South Africa with HIV awareness information. And here we've got a partnership with MTN, and we're learning a lot about how you can not just put a channel out there, not just reach and engage a broad ecosystem in a rapid way over 6 months in a way that would be almost impossible in this country. But how do you learn from it? How do you look at that channel and see what types of messages and what ways of reaching people gets them to act? Fundamentally, try and understand what those motivations are and how to unlock them. So we're looking at call volumes and the adjustments we're making in messaging that are tripling call volumes to the National AIDS Helpline in this case in South Africa. But we've also helped a client like MTM understand new ways to create meaningful connections for people, to get information to people in a way that's relevant, that they'll act upon. And that gets us to the concept of shared value and the notion that in exploring these kind of spaces and bringing together what we know and are good at from the private sector and the public sector, we can surface models that create a lot of both societal value and business value. In this case, new models for how people can test and manage disease through mobile technology and off-the-shelf diagnostics. How many of you are familiar with the concept of shared value? So Michael Porter and Michael Kramer wrote a pretty seminal piece. It's really trying to get us past the notion of giving back, of corporate social responsibility, and back to the notion that these are investments. They're investments that can pay off. If you look at a continuum of the ways in which businesses and organizations might innovate, you can place this at one end of that continuum. Not at the end, not a way of giving back to a community or a country or region after you've established business, but a way of understanding early and a way of learning about new innovation models. And we're working with a number of foundations, the J&J Foundation, GE Foundation, to look at how you flip it on its head and how you really drive that sense of shared value early, how you look at the investments they want to make in social good and turn it into an engine for innovation. So here we are, my final thesis here. The social value and business value are inextricably linked, and the design has to be right at that intersection. And that's where I try and build my practice, and my kind of challenge to you all is to sit right in the middle there. My fear is that at a conference like this, you're going to walk away thinking, if I can't build a pure practice doing social good, then I'm a failure as a designer. And I really think that fear is out there. And the reality is that our strength, my credibility in so many of these initiatives that I get involved in has to do with the business value I've created and an understanding of how you work with markets and how you can work with the private sector. ED is one of our greatest assets. So don't walk into these situations feeling like you need to apologize for it. Walk in and use it as a strength. But also take what you're learning from the social sector and bring it back, because that's the only way we're going to open up and really transform decision-making and the opportunity to create value and social value in the private sector. I'm almost out of time. I'm going to pause for a second. And I just want to introduce one little parting gift, one little parting kind of offering to the community here. So along the way, working with a number of organizations, particularly the Girl Effect, something kept coming up for me, and comes up for me a lot when I work in the social sector, which is, what do we leave behind? You engage communities of people, you create energy, you shift possibilities, you teach them new skills. Fundamentally, design is about skills. These are communities that don't give a crap about design, don't give a crap about innovation. They want skills, they want to better themselves, and they want to solve problems. And so we started looking at how we could take the design process and turn it on its head and turn it into something that was fundamentally about that sort of skill development. It happened over 4 weeks initially, that work that I was talking about with young girls in Nairobi. And the idea was to kind of look at a traditional design process and pair it with skill development. We called it the Explorer Club. And along the way, the girls were there not to design, not to be our partners, but to develop their own skills and to grow and build their sense of leadership. I'll give you a little flavor of it. So these are some little examples of the types of activities we did. And the girls kept saying, I don't want this to stop. I want to take this back. I want to teach other people. Because they felt a sense of empowerment that they hadn't had before. And again, it had nothing to do with design in their minds. It had to do with skills. It had to do, to some degree, with the license to go in and ask questions in a different way in their community, with understanding how to do, of what to do with that information. So we decided to turn that into an open source toolkit that we're handing out and trying to make available. The interesting thing is the word design never appears anywhere in this. It's not for designers, and it's not a design process. We call it the Collective Action Toolkit, and it's really about helping groups create value and make change. The slogan is groups make change. That's the approach here, and we're trying to give groups tools that they can use right out of the box. Don't require design thinking or design to interpret. So I'm running out of time here. I just wanted to throw this up here. There's a link, there's a password, an email address, et cetera. Would love to engage the broader community, figure out how we can all take advantage of kind of what we've learned and understand a little bit better the connection between the skills of design and social change. Thank you.